Hey guys, okay, just like before, we're going to talk about the shape tools in Illustrator. Underneath this rectangle tool is hiding a bunch of shape tools. Now we're going to go all through these. We're going to leave the flare tool alone. Maybe you can play with that on your own. I'm going to tear this off just by hitting that sidebar, which we covered in the last video. And we're also going to talk about fill and stroke color. Now we'll talk about color as another element of art by itself, but today we're going to get into how we're going to change those colors as we work with both fill and stroke color. So let's get into this with the rectangle tool. I am working on a layer on its own. And maybe I'm going to make a new layer just for the shapes and leave our line layer alone that we did in the last video. The rectangle tool can create, as you guessed it, can create rectangles. But if you hold shift down, it can also create perfect squares. So again, rectangles, both thin and wide, or again, perfect squares by holding shift down. Shift constrains proportions, and we can really easily get those perfect squares. Just make sure to keep your shift button held down and release it last whenever you make those squares. These black rectangles and squares are a little bit too big, so I'm going to reduce the size of them, and I'm also just going to give them a stroke of black. I'm going to select them all just by drawing this window around everything. And notice that we have a fill color here and a stroke color here in this kind of squared donut here with the center taken out. And right now we just have a black fill. So I'm going to hit this button, which switches our black over to our stroke, our fill over to our stroke. And now we have a black stroke and no fill as a color. That's that red slash that you see through there. And there they are. And I'm going to reduce these in size because they're a bit too big. And I'm just going to scale those down by holding down shift, so I leave the same proportions. And maybe I'll move these up here since they're the first ones on the list. Maybe a bit bigger. And that's the rectangle tool. I'm going to skip over the rounded rectangle for a minute and talk about the ellipse tool. The ellipse tool can make ellipses just like we drew inside of class. And you can either go with vertical, horizontal, but you can also make perfect circles with the ellipse tool by holding down shift. And again, just make sure that you release shift last whenever you make those. And that is our ellipse tool. I kept those all pretty small, so I'm going to leave that there. Now I want to show you something special with these rectangles. I'm going to copy one of them over and maybe one of the squares over. Now you've been used to doing, or you may have done this already, copy and paste, Command C and Command V, copies and pastes over shapes, or over any object rather. There's actually a quicker way than Command C and Command V though. If you select a shape or an object in Illustrator and hold down the Option key, you get these double cursors next to each other if you're over an object. So over here, there's nothing, but once you roll over an object, you get these double arrows, and then you click and drag. And now you have a copy and paste command all in one key together, and you can keep duplicating and copying over as much as you want. And keep going. All with the Option key. I need one of these, so I'm going to delete the other one. And I want to zoom in on this other square here because I want to show you something special related to the rounded rectangle. And it's a bit customized version of the rounded rectangle. These little targets at each corner, these little circles here, allow you to pull in and round those corners off just by pulling and dragging those corners in. They round those corners off. So very customizable way of rounding our hard corners. But the really cool part is that if I undo and make another version, and so let's do our rounded rectangle here, that all four sides, all four corners are kind of rounded the same way, which is nice. We can get a chance to talk about another tool, which is our direct select tool, or our white arrow. Our white arrow and our black arrow. So this is a selection tool, and this is our direct selection tool. The difference between them is that the black arrow or the selection tool selects the entire shape. The direct selection tool, if I click away or deselect that, I can select one anchor or the parts of the whole. I can select one anchor point and move that around if I wanted to, for example, and change that from a square to some kind of polygon that is transformed. Maybe it's an arrow shape. Let me undo that. But that being said, if I select just this one point, this one anchor, I can just have a chance to round that corner. Or maybe it's this corner. Or maybe it's both. Maybe it's a third corner and we have one that still stays that corner and everything else is rounded off. The direct select tool will allow you to select portions. It will allow you also to select just line segments. So we can also, not only can we select our anchor points, we can select distances in between points. So let me draw another square, smaller square, and I'm gonna select the direct select tool and grab this path or that distance between those two anchor points and move that around, and that moves both of those anchor points as well as the line segment in between them. Again, here's me grabbing just one anchor point. Here's grabbing the line segment and moving that around. So the direct selection tool, very powerful to use as far as getting detailed and really customizing your shape. Okay, the Polygon Tool. The Polygon Tool by default will draw a polygon, but it will draw a six-sided polygon, a hexagon. And that's all well and good, but what if you want to really break that up and draw a 12-sided polygon? Well, we can do that by single clicking. Not clicking and dragging, but single clicking. And this dialog box comes up. And we could change the sides of our polygon. Now, single clicking is a great way to get started with all of these shapes. So for example, if I wanted to single click a square and type in exact measurements like 3 centimeters and 3 centimeters, we can do that. Let me zoom out so you can see that. It's a great way to get exactly what you want. Or an ellipse or a circle that is exactly 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. We can get that. So single clicking works with all of these shapes. It's just that in the polygon, we can also specify number of sides. The same way goes for the star tool. If we single click with the star tool, by default it gives us a 5-pointed star. But if we single click, we could get a 20-pointed star. What about a 100-pointed star? It's a lot of spines, and it really starts to get interesting when we play around with fill color. So I'm going to scale this up, and I'm going to take the stroke away. So I'm going to give it a fill of black. Here is black, and there is no stroke to that. So there's no outline to that. It's just all fill. And I'm going to put a white filled version of it. I'm going to duplicate it first, so I'm going to hold down Option and drag. Look what happens there when I drag that around. What a cool effect that is. Let's see if we can get that. There we go. There are my 2 stars. And I'm going to fill one with white. I think it's this one. I'm going to fill that with white. And then I'm going to select my outline and don't give it a stroke. So now I have a white fill over a black fill. And look at that. Really cool effects going on here. With very simple shapes. Detailed but simple. Kind of like that. What if we wanted to pick a different color? Maybe a blue instead of a black. Or maybe a magenta. If I click on the fill color and double click, I can get this color picker dialog box and change this fill color. And so now it's a magenta fill and a white fill together. So let's talk about this again, just fill and stroke. If I wanted to change the stroke color to this star, I can double click on the stroke, and let's say if we wanted a mustard color closer to red, a yellow that's closer to red and closer to orange, hit OK. That's pretty tough to see, so maybe I would up the stroke amount. There we go. And what if it had a red fill? Double click. A red fill. Oh, I needed to select the star. Oftentimes I do this and forget to select the actual shape I want to fill. There we go. Luckily this little indicator remembers your last color you picked. So if I picked a blue, for example, hit OK. You can change that. You can also apply fills to different shapes. The same shape or the same color to a different shape. If I select this star and want to apply this effect to that star, I can select it, grab my eyedropper tool, and select the other star, and it applies all the same color that I picked. I can select this circle and select the eyedropper tool and get that. We can change, just like when we did our lines, we can change our type of line to dashed. What if it doesn't have a fill anymore? What if it has a black outline? What if that stroke is thicker? What if this becomes red? A lot of things to change and play around with. That is the star polygon ellipse rounded rectangle via the rectangle tool. What happens when we want to transform something? Well, we can transform anything by selecting it with our selection tool, and we can scale it down by holding down shift, and we can scale things proportionally or not proportionally by not holding down anything. We can also rotate shapes and rotate objects by grabbing right outside of the anchor points. If we hover over outside of our anchor points, our cursor changes into a rounded, kind of curved arrows that are telling us that we can rotate. And we can transform our objects any way we want to. We can rotate our star so that it's right side up, or a point on the top there. Okay, play around, have fun. I'll see you next time.